In this video, we are going to make a code review for API gateways into our e-commerce application. So here you can see our API gateways in this box. We have two API gateway, one for the Ocelot API gateway, which using Ocelot library in .NET, and the second for the aggregator microservices, which basically aggregate several microservice requests and respond back to one response to the client application. So we will focus on this API gateway first. This is implementing with Ocelot API gateway, accommodate the request from the clients and reroute the request and traffic for the incoming microservices. So this is the reroute through the API gateway function in the Ocelot API gateway. And we also run multiple different API gateways and implement backend for front-end application in this layer. And also we are going to implement the gateway aggregation pattern, and we can say that service aggregation pattern in the shopping aggregator microservices, and all these microservices are containerized with using Docker files. So let's get started. Here you can see that we have an API gateways folder. If you expand this folder, you can see our two folders representing both these API gateway microservices. Now I'm going to open Ocelot API gateway, and if you expand the Ocelot API gateway, you can see that there is only JSON files, because we are using .NET Ocelot library that provide to rerouting traffic according to JSON files. If you open the Ocelot JSON file, and you can see that there is some route configurations, an array of the configuration including this line of code. So every configuration has downstream and upstream configuration. So upstream means that API gateway exposing API to the client application. So that means API gateway exposing APIs to the client application with the upstream configuration. And downstream means that invoke the downstream microservices in here. So all this configuration is located according to upstream and downstream. For example, here you can see an example of the configuration routing the traffic. So basically we are exposing API which name is /catalog, and we are exposing these API for HTTP GET, POST and PUT methods. So after that, this incoming event from the client application routing to the downstream microservices, which is the catalog API, and we can choose the Ocelot API gateway to understand properly, because we are exposing localhost 8000 when we are running the Docker compose command. So in the downstream path, we basically invoke the downstream microservice, which is the catalog API, and the path is /API version 1 /catalog. So where this path come from? If you open the microservices and catalog microservices and see the catalog controller at the beginning of the class, you can see that this catalog controller API invoked by this URL, which is the API /version 1 /controller name, which is the catalog. So that's why we can give this name and downstream path in here. So this is the atypical configuration to exposing APIs to client application and redirecting the request to the downstream catalog microservices. And if you scroll down, you can see the whole microservices invoke with different HTTP methods and different downstream paths and exposing the client application. For example, basket API is starting in here. We are exposing HTTP GET and HTTP delete for exposing API /basket /username with as a configuration of the username, and we are going to trigger API version 1 basket username with the localhost 8001, which is representing to our basket API. So you can scroll down and see the options for the HTTP post, delete and ordering and discount API. For one JSON file could be handled the whole traffic and represent the API gateway rerouting to traffic downstream microservices in the Ocelot API gateway. So basically API gateway accommodates the request coming from the client application and redirect them to the internal microservices to perform use cases, and the redirection is handled in the JSON files with the downstream and upstream configuration in here. So now we are going to continue with the aggregator microservices. Here you can see that we have second folder which name is shopping aggregator. So in the shopping aggregator, we basically implementation of microservices of aggregation. So these microservices exposing one API and get one request from the client application, and dispatch these requests to communicate with several internal microservices and collect data from several different microservices and then aggregate them into one response object and return this one object to the client application. So this is the implementation of the service aggregation pattern to avoid chatty communication between client and the backend microservices. If we don't develop these microservices, the client application should be invoked one by one all these microservices and collect and aggregate by itself. Instead of that, we have creating these aggregated microservices with the implementation of the gateway aggregation pattern and service aggregator pattern. So now let's examine this folder. As you remember that this is typical ASP.NET application, and in the controller class you can see the shopping controller. Basically we have one method which is the get shopping method, and we are exposing this one method to the client application that can invoke by username. But in this method we basically using different services, which is the catalog, basket and order service, and invoke these downstream microservices and collect data and create a custom object which is the shopping module object, which including the all data from different microservices with basket, product and ordering microservices. So this is typical implementation of aggregator method for shopping aggregator microservices. Also you can see the implementation and invoke method in this catalog, basket and order service. If you expand the services method, you can see, for example, basket service method using the HTTP client object in order to invoke basket microservices with this URL, and as the same way catalog invoking these URLs using the HTTP client. And lastly we have seen that basket, catalog and order service invoke the order service with using HTTP client and send a request to this URL information, and all these response object will be collect and communicate and aggregate under the shopping module object and return back to the client application. So as you can see that we have finished the Oscillator API and aggregator microservices. In the next video we are going to focus on the client applications.